When you woke up this morning, did you feel any older than you did yesterday? When you looked in the mirror, did you notice lines that hadn't been there before? Or perhaps more gray hairs than you'd gone to bed with? No? Me neither. I feel the same, and each day I wake up, I don't feel as if time is passing. I don't notice it. I can tell you that I move a little bit slower in the morning when I drag myself out of bed than I used to, and it isn't until I look at a picture that I'm in, my wife loves to take pictures, that I see the difference a few years makes. It does make me wonder what I'll look like and feel like when I'm 60, or 70, or older if I'm so lucky and remain healthy. But what if you were given the choice? You can't freeze time, but what if you were allowed to pick the age you looked like? And the age you picked would be the way you appeared to the outside world for the rest of your life. What age would you choose? 25 or 30? I am going to tell you about a man who was able to do just that. He was 45, or appeared to be 45, for over 2,000 years. You might even know him. He could be your neighbor now, or your mailman, or perhaps he's your mother's long-lost cousin who doesn't look a day older than he did when you first met him as a child. If this is the case, you may have just had a strange encounter with a count. And I'm not talking about the immortal Count Dracula. The man is, or was, the Count of Saint Germain. In 1760, the Countess von Georgi heard that a man had arrived in Paris to pay a visit to one of her friends. This man, she was told, was the Count de Saint Germain. Now, the Countess had known of a man by the same name, a man she'd met 50 years before in 1710. Now, curious to see if he was related or perhaps knew of the Count that she'd once known, she made arrangements to meet him. When she did, she was shocked to find that he appeared to be the same man. She made a remark about the resemblance he had to the Count she'd once known, only to be corrected by him. He told her he was the same man, and he even remembered their meeting. He even went so far as to give details about it, thinking, and rightly so, that it was impossible for the man standing before her, who appeared to be no older than 45, to be the same one. She called him on it. "Madame, I am very old," he said. She observed that he must be close to 100 years old. His reply? That is not impossible. But isn't it? Isn't it impossible to appear the same age year after year? As wonderful as that might sound, it's surely the stuff of stories. Oscar Wilde's fictional character Dorian Gray never aged, but that's because he had a portrait of himself that aged instead. What was the Count's secret? Well, for one, it is said that he never ate in public. Instead, he would sip a special tea of which the ingredients were known only to him. The year he was born is recorded as being between the years of 1690 to 1720, but that is up for dispute. Even the Count himself was fond of making incredible claims as to his actual age. Sometimes he was 500 years old. Other times he would hint at being around during the time of Christ's crucifixion. And there was another thing remarkable about the Count, apparent age-defying appearances aside. He seemed to have an enormous amount of wealth. He traveled extensively and had friends all over Europe in very high places. Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel wrote in his memoirs that the Count was one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived. Now, very little is known of the Count's younger years. By very little, I mean none at all. Now, his actual identity has never been pinned down. What is known is that he first appeared in London after being arrested under suspicion of being a Jacobite spy. It is also noted in letters at the time that he was an accomplished musician and spoke over 4 different languages. English wasn't one of them, but it didn't take him long to master it. His talent as a composer is said to have brought him to the attention of Tchaikovsky, and 2 of his compositions now reside in the British Museum, one from 1745 and another one from 1760. Now, if music wasn't enough, the Count was also a painter. and by some accounts a jeweler who could take a flawed or dusky diamond and make it appear flawless. He was the quintessential Renaissance man. The Count's next appearance was in France, where he performed diplomatic missions for Louis XV. And during this time, he attended high-profile dinners, told of his adventures to everyone's rapt attention, and was, by all accounts, somewhat of a ladies' man. Now, to further ingratiate himself with the ladies, he claimed to possess the knowledge of a wash, or face wash, that would help to preserve their beauty. He also said that he could take a handful of diamonds, melt them down, and produce one large, perfect diamond. And whether or not he actually did this isn't recorded, but what has been written of him, and by the author Giacomo Casanova no less, is that the Count was an astonishing man. Casanova held that the Count might be an impostor, but he was an interesting one. Impostor or not, he made his way through Europe. He traveled to Amsterdam, where he helped set up a porcelain factory. He then tried to broker a deal between France and Britain, who were at odds during the 7 Years' War, and that had engulfed most of Europe. He failed at that and had to eventually leave Holland under an assumed name to escape being arrested. But then he made appearances in both Berlin and Venice. He was always ingratiating, and he was always telling tall tales that were received as entertainment, lies, or completely true. Voltaire, one of the most respected philosophers of the time, is said to have commented that Saint Germain was, quote, a man who never dies and who knows everything. But he did die, or so we are led to believe, in 1784. The Count enjoyed and maintained many friendships, and one of these was Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel. I mentioned him earlier. In 1779, the Count showed up on his doorstep, and the two men collaborated on experiments to create precious gems and jewelry. Both had an interest in mysticism and were intrigued by the possibilities of alchemy. It is also said that the Count dabbled in, or belonged to, quite a few secret societies around the world, among which included the Freemasons, the Order of the Templars, and, you may recognize this name, the Illuminati. Now, the Count's collaboration with the prince lasted for 6 years. While the prince was away on business, he received word that his friend, the Count of Saint Germain, had died at their factory on February 27th. The year was 1784. Remember that date, 1784. Death has the unique ability to put a stop even to the grandest of ambitions. Except, of course, if your name is the Count of Saint Germain. And what was the date I asked you to remember? 1784? Yes? Well, in 1785, he represented the Freemasons at a convention, this according to their official records. He also popped up in Germany at the elbow of Anton Mesmer, the great hypnotist for whom the term mesmerism comes from. And then, in 1789, after the fall of the Bastille during the French Revolution, the Count had a lengthy conversation with the Comtesse Adhemar. This was 5 years after his purported death, and according to the Comtesse, she would continue to see him a number of times over the years, always the same age, always the same man, and the last time being in 1820. Then there is the strange anecdote of Major Fraser. The journalist Albert Van Dam wrote that this man, Major Fraser, bore an uncanny resemblance to the deceased Count. He met Fraser in 1821, and apparently this doppelganger, if it was a doppelganger, was very well off, had a wealth of knowledge about England and its past, and hinted that he was much older than he appeared to be. And then, he vanished. Nothing more was ever heard of or from Major Fraser. He walked into the pages of Van Dam's memoir and out again, without a trace or an explanation of why he was there at all. Now, apparently, Saint Germain grew tired of sneaking around in the shadows of history or donning alternate personas because he continued to make appearances throughout the 19th century. He even posed for a picture with the mother of Theosophy, Madame Blavatsky. Whether or not the photo is genuine is up for debate, but it goes to show you that you can't keep a good count down, especially an immortal one. Even more odd is the case of the French entertainer Richard Chanfrey. Chanfrey stepped into the spotlight in 1972, claiming to actually be the Count himself. He turned lead into gold on television and dated the singer Dalida for several years. He repeated this trick before scientists in 1975 and even recorded a duet with the famous singer. And in 1983, he committed suicide. Or did he? One story is that he was found dead inside his car. the apparent victim of intentional asphyxiation. Then there's the story that a suicide note was found, but no body. Although the second story doesn't account for the fact that his girlfriend at the time was found with him also deceased. So we can probably chalk the sad tale of Richard Chanfrey up to a case of assumed identity, for the sake of entertainment. What we can't dismiss are the Count's accomplishments. Set aside the claims of immortality and his penchant for random appearances throughout history, the Count, during the period when he was the most prolific and visible, are as follows. He composed 6 sonatas, 7 solos for the violin, 4 songs, and an Italian opera for which he contributed 42 arias. He was said to be quite the virtuoso himself when it came to the violin. He was also a painter. He spoke multiple languages, and he was an alchemist and chemist. Not bad for one man, immortal or not. Wherever the Count of Saint Germain is now, whether it be in the afterlife or somewhere here on earth in the present, he may be smiling, sipping his age-defying tea, and playing his violin. Thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe and leave a review. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, tell them about it. You can also help support the show by going to strangeencounters.org. I would really like to hear your suggestions for future episodes, and if you've had a strange encounter with something unusual or paranormal, I would love to hear it. Visit the contact page for information on submitting your story. And until next time, please take care of yourself. It's a strange world out there. Good night. Still there? This message is for the Count of Saint Germain. If you're out there somewhere and happen to be listening, let me know. Go to strangeencounters.org/contact. Catch you later.